It began on one of those New York afternoons when the cold feels personal, slipping through your coat no matter how many layers you wear. Luca Rivera tightened the strap of his delivery bag and lowered his head against the wind. He wasn't thinking about much, just the packages he still had to drop off and whether he'd make it back to the Bronx in time for dinner with his daughter Emily. He hated being late, even though she always said it was fine. He was halfway past Bryant Park when the sound reached him, voices overlapping, sharp with panic. At first he thought it was just city noise, the usual mix of horns and chatter. But then he saw them. A group of tourists huddled under a lamppost, maps flapping like broken wings. A woman with a stroller was near tears. Two older men argued, one in German, the other in Mandarin, their words crashing against each other. The young tour guide in the centre looked helpless, clutching a sign that promised multilingual service, but clearly unable to help in any language at all. Luca slowed. He should have kept walking. He had a train to catch, bills to pay, a little girl waiting. But something inside him, the part that had once spent years teaching languages at Hunter College, wouldn't let him. He knew what it felt like to be lost, to have words in your mouth that no one else understood. He stepped closer and spoke softly to the elderly couple. "Se han perdido?" "Are you lost?" Their faces lit up, relief breaking across them like sunlight. Then he turned to the German man, switching without pause. The man blinked in surprise, then nodded quickly, his shoulders dropping. Luca bowed slightly toward the Mandarin speaker, choosing each tone with care. The man's eyes widened. A child tugged at his mother's coat and whispered, "Mummy, he's like a wizard." Within minutes, the storm of confusion calmed. Luca pulled a flyer from his pocket and sketched a simple map, labelling landmarks in 4 languages. What had been chaos moments before dissolved into smiles and laughter. Strangers who hadn't understood one another now waved as they headed off in the right direction. Luca exhaled, already thinking about the train schedule and how late he might be. But just as he turned to leave, he noticed her. A woman stood apart from the group, tall and poised in a navy coat with a scarf tucked neatly at her neck. She hadn't spoken once, hadn't asked for help, only watched in silence with an expression he couldn't read. And though Luca didn't know it yet, that quiet gaze would follow him long after the tourists had disappeared. By the time Luca pushed open the apartment door, night had already swallowed the Bronx streets. The place smelled faintly of macaroni and cheese, Emily's favourite, reheated in the oven to wait for him. She was curled on the couch in her pyjamas, her small face lighting up the second she saw him. "You're late," she teased, closing the worn copy of The Little Prince in her lap. "I know," he said, setting his bag by the door. "Got caught up helping some tourists." Emily tilted her head. "Did you use your magic words again?" He chuckled, hanging up his coat. "A few." They sat down to dinner, mac and cheese, apple slices and 2 glasses of water. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Emily talked with the kind of excitement only kids could carry. A new friend named Zara, who liked drawing galaxies, the silly joke her teacher told, how she was going to design a spaceship big enough to hold every star in the sky. Luca listened carefully, laughing when she wanted him to, nodding when she grew serious, grateful for every ordinary second with her. After they washed the dishes together, Emily tugged him toward the wall above her bed. Dozens of drawings hung there, taped side by side. Rockets, planets, comets, worlds she'd imagined into being with her crayons. One new picture stood out. It showed a rocket ship with more windows than usual, each window filled with a smiling stick figure. Across the top she had written in uneven purple letters, "Captain Luca." "That's you," she announced proudly. "The ship's bigger now because more people need to fit inside." He blinked hard, his chest tightening. That's quite a promotion." Emily giggled and hugged him around the waist. For a moment, the weight of his day lifted. But later, when she was asleep with her sketchbook on the pillow beside her, the weight returned. Luca sat at the kitchen table under the dim ceiling light, sifting through a stack of envelopes. Rent, utilities, and one with the hospital logo stamped across the front. He tore it open and scanned the numbers. Another therapy session denied by insurance. He pressed his palms to his forehead, fighting the urge to curse out loud. How many times had he asked? How many times had the answer been the same? Not covered. He looked over at Emily, curled up beneath her blanket. Breathing softly with effort, he wished he could carry for her. His phone buzzed on the table. For a moment, he braced for another reminder from the delivery company. Instead, it was a new number. The message read, "My name is Ms. Alvarez. I'm a teacher at PS 148. I saw what you did today in Bryant Park. Would you visit my classroom? My students are learning English. They need someone like you." Luca stared at the words, reading them twice, then again. He should have ignored it. He had no time, no energy, no space for anything extra. But something stirred inside him, the same instinct that had made him stop at Bryant Park when he should have kept walking. It wasn't just a message, it was a door, and he wasn't sure if he had the courage to open it. Friday came faster than Luca expected. Twice that morning he nearly convinced himself not to go. His delivery route was already tight, and another hospital bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter, waiting like a shadow. But by late morning, he was standing outside the brick school building, hands shoved in his pockets, wondering why on earth he had agreed. The hallways smelled of pencil shavings and cafeteria pizza, the kind of smell that never leaves a school. Posters lined the walls. "Respect one another. Read more. You belong here." Luca read the words as if they were daring him to believe them. Ms. Alvarez met him at the office door. She was short, with kind eyes that carried the calm of someone who had weathered storms before. "You must be Mr. Rivera," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming. They've been nervous about speaking. Maybe you can change that." He hesitated. "I don't know if I'm the right person." Her smile widened. "I think you are." Inside the classroom, a dozen children sat scattered at desks. Some fidgeted with pencils, others avoided eye contact. A few clutched notebooks filled with words they didn't know how to pronounce. Luca recognized the look, the same one he used to see on his college students before they found their confidence. He crouched beside a boy with dark curls who stared hard at his desk. "What's your name?" he asked gently, switching to Spanish. The boy's eyes flickered up, surprised. "Mateo," he whispered. "Strong name," Luca said with a nod. "Want to try it in English?" The boy hesitated, then stumbled through the sound. "Mateo." "Perfect," Luca grinned, and the boy's shoulders loosened just a little. He moved across the room, shifting languages the way some people shift keys on a piano. Arabic for a shy girl in the corner, French for a boy who had only arrived weeks ago, even a few words of Tagalog that made another child gasp in recognition. Slowly, the silence cracked. Then it broke. Laughter rippled through the class when Luca drew stick figures on the board, blending words from different languages into one funny sentence. Finally, a girl with wide brown eyes stood up. Her hands shook, but her voice was clear. "My name is Amina." The room erupted in applause, not because her English was perfect, but because she had spoken at all. Luca felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. For a moment, he wasn't a courier rushing against time. He was a teacher again. He was useful. But just as the applause faded, a voice cut through the air. A man stood at the back of the room, arms folded tight, his expression carved in stone. His words came sharp and cold. "We live in America. English should be enough." The children froze, the joy in the room thinning like smoke. Luca turned slowly, every eye now on him, waiting to see what he would do. The classroom emptied slowly after the lesson, kids still buzzing with energy. Some practiced their new words in the hallway, laughing at their own mistakes. But near the door, the father who had spoken up lingered, his arms crossed, his eyes hard. "You're encouraging them too much," he said flatly. "In this country they need English. All this other stuff, it's just noise." Luca wiped the chalk dust from his hands, steadying his voice. "They are learning English, but when a child feels seen in their own language, it gives them the courage to try. That's not slowing them down. That's giving them a place to start." The man shook his head. "What they need is discipline, not hand-holding." He turned and left, the door swinging shut behind him. For a moment the room was quiet, the tension still hanging like smoke. Then Ms. Alvarez spoke gently. "Don't let him shake you. Most of these parents are grateful. You gave their kids something they've been too afraid to ask for." Still, the words stuck with Luca long after he left the school. On the subway ride home, he stared at his reflection in the dark window. Was he really helping, or just complicating things? He thought of Emily, how he had once whispered Spanish lullabies to her when she was a baby, how her tiny chest had risen and fallen against him, fragile but alive. Was that noise too? When he walked through the apartment door, Emily was at the table with her crayons spread across the surface like a rainbow explosion. She looked up and smiled. "You're smiling different today," she said. "Different how?" he asked, slipping off his jacket. "Not the tired smile, the real one." He laughed softly, sitting beside her. "I went to a classroom, helped some kids who were scared to speak." Her eyes lit up. "Like me on my first day?" "Exactly like you." She grinned, then bent over her paper. This time she drew a rocket ship even bigger than before, filling the windows with tiny faces. "Your ship's getting crowded, Captain," she teased. "You'll need more seats." Luca swallowed, emotion pressing at his throat. "Guess I'll figure it out." Later that evening, when Emily was asleep, his phone buzzed on the counter. He expected another delivery schedule update. Instead, it was a new message. "My name is Maya Chen. I write for Bronx Community News. A teacher shared a clip of you with the kids. I'd like to talk." Luca froze, staring at the screen. He hadn't even known anyone had filmed him. He hadn't thought his small classroom visit mattered beyond those four walls. But maybe the world had been watching longer than he realised. The cafeteria didn't look like much, folding chairs in rows, a stage that squeaked under every step, and a table of store-bought cookies. But that night, the place felt different. Handwritten signs in Spanish, Arabic, and English lined the walls. Parents arrived with children tugging at their hands, their voices a mix of accents and nerves. Luca walked in with Emily, her small hand gripping his. She whispered, "There are so many people, Dad." "Just remember," he told her, bending low, "they're as nervous as you are." Ms. Alvarez waved them toward the front. "Good, you're here. Tonight's the first family language night. We want families to feel they belong. Will you help me show them?" Luca nodded, though his heart thumped hard in his chest. He wasn't used to microphones anymore. He wasn't used to being seen. When the program began, the room was restless. Some parents leaned forward, curious. Others sat stiffly, arms folded. The same father from the classroom was there, expression tight, as if daring Luca to stumble. Luca took the microphone, cleared his throat, and held up a stack of paper slips. "Tonight, I want to ask one thing," he said. "Write the word home in the language that feels most real to you. Doesn't matter if it's English or something else. Just home." For a moment, the room was still. Then a mother wrote casa. Another added maison. A boy scribbled the Arabic word for home, his small hands shaking as he passed it forward. Soon the stage wall filled with scraps of paper, different letters, different colours, all saying the same thing. Parents rose from their chairs, pointing at the wall. Some smiled. A few even clapped. For the first time that evening, the air felt lighter, warmer, like a bridge had been built right there in the cafeteria. Emily tugged at Luca's sleeve. "They liked it," she whispered. But before he could answer, she coughed. A small sound at first, then sharper. She pressed her hand to her chest, her face paling under the fluorescent lights. The cough deepened, rattling, pulling every eye in the room toward her. Luca's body went cold. He dropped the microphone and scooped her into his arms. "Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Call someone!" Ms. Alvarez shouted, rushing forward. Chairs scraped, parents gasped, and in an instant, the room that had been filled with hope was overtaken by fear. The slips of paper with the word home fluttered on the wall behind them, a fragile promise as Luca held his daughter close and whispered, "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just stay with me." The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and fear. Luca barely felt the cold night air on his face as he carried Emily through the hospital doors, her body trembling with each cough. Nurses moved quickly, asking questions he answered in broken pieces. Her name, her history, her condition. Then they took her from his arms and disappeared down the hallway. He collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting room, his hands still shaking. The smell of disinfectant mixed with burnt coffee. A vending machine hummed in the corner. Every detail felt too sharp, too cruel. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, a doctor appeared, his tone calm but serious. "She's stable for now. We've given her oxygen, but she needs ongoing respiratory therapy, consistently. Without it, these episodes will continue." Luca rubbed his face with both hands. "The insurance..." The doctor sighed. "I know, but she can't go without it." Then he left, leaving the words heavy as stone. When Luca entered the small hospital room, Emily was lying under thin blankets, her cheeks pale, an oxygen mask pressed gently to her face. Her eyes fluttered open. "Dad?" "I'm here," he whispered, sitting beside her bed, taking her tiny hand in his. "You promised the ship wouldn't leave without me," she said, her voice muffled but steady. Tears stung his eyes, "and it never will." She gave a weak smile, then drifted back to sleep, her hand still gripping his. Behind him, the door opened quietly. Ms. Alvarez stepped in, her face lined with worry. A moment later, Maya Chen appeared too, not with her camera, just a small notebook tucked under her arm. "I came as soon as I heard," Maya said softly. "Don't worry, I'm not writing anything tonight. I just wanted to check on her." Luca nodded, unable to find words. Hours later, when the room was quiet except for the steady beep of the monitor, Luca sat with his head bowed, his hand still holding Emily's. His eyes burned from holding back tears, but finally he let them fall, quiet, unguarded, the way he never allowed himself to break at home. On the bedside table sat a stack of hospital forms, words blurred by medical jargon and fine print. He turned one over and scribbled absent-mindedly in the margins, tiny notes in Spanish, French, Mandarin, old habits, old skills. He stared at the page, his throat tight. Maybe his languages weren't just pieces of a past life. Maybe they were tools. Maybe they could be the one thing strong enough to build the future Emily needed. The next week, Luca found himself back in the school auditorium, this time for the monthly PTA meeting. The folding chairs were packed, the air thick with the low hum of parents' voices. He sat near the back, his mind still raw from the hospital stay. Emily was stable now, but the bills on his kitchen table said otherwise. He had no appetite for debate, but Ms. Alvarez had asked him to come. "Your voice matters," she'd said. At the front, administrators shuffled papers. The meeting droned through budget updates no one listened to, until a mother in a red sweater stood. "I heard talk about turning one of our classrooms into some kind of language lounge," she said sharply. "That's not what our kids need. They need math. They need English. Period." Murmurs rippled, some nodded, others frowned. Then a father rose, the same one who had glared at Luca in the classroom. His voice carried across the room. "We live in America. If we keep catering to every background, our kids will never fit in. We're not here to celebrate where they came from. We're here to move forward." The room shifted uneasily. Some parents looked away. Others sat straighter, as if waiting for a fight. Luca felt the weight of silence pressing down. He hadn't planned to speak, but his legs carried him forward before he could stop himself. He turned toward the Haitian mother he had met in the welcome room. She sat clutching her son's hand, hesitant to meet anyone's eyes. Luca knelt beside her, speaking first in gentle French Creole, then translating aloud for the room. "She says she wants her son to succeed. She says she studies English every night, but the forms from school still confuse her. She says she doesn't want pity. She just needs a hand, not a shortcut." The room hushed. The boy's small fingers tightened around his mother's arm. A few parents wiped their eyes. Even those who had sat stiffly leaned forward, listening in a way they hadn't before. Luca stood slowly, his voice steady. "This isn't about slowing anyone down. It's about making sure no one is left behind. A child doesn't lose their roots when they learn English, they grow stronger." For a long moment, the auditorium was still. Then, at the front table, a district coordinator adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Rivera," she said carefully, "we've been considering a pilot program for a family welcome room. What you just did," she gestured toward the Haitian mother and her son, "that's exactly what we hoped for. Would you consider leading it?" Gasps rose. Some parents clapped quietly, others exchanged skeptical glances. The father in the corner shook his head, muttering under his breath. Luca froze, his pulse pounding. He had only wanted to help for a moment, not take on something this big. Emily's pale face in the hospital flashed in his mind. Could he stretch himself thinner when she needed him most? The room waited, the silence heavier than applause. 2 weeks later, the old storage room at the end of the hall barely looked like itself. The cracked floors had been scrubbed until they shone, the walls painted a soft yellow by volunteers who left their brushstrokes uneven, but full of care. Someone donated a couch, the cushions worn but welcoming. A bookshelf lined with second-hand titles stood proudly in the corner, storybooks in Spanish and French, poetry in Arabic, dictionaries stacked like bricks. On the door hung a plain sign, hand-lettered by Ms. Alvarez, "Welcome Room." Luca lingered in the doorway with Emily at his side. Parents stepped in cautiously, some hugging their coats as if unsure they belonged. Others moved quickly to the shelves, flipping through the books, whispering to their children in quiet voices. It wasn't polished, not yet. But it was alive. Emily tugged his sleeve. "It feels empty, Dad." He glanced around. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the blank wall near the couch. "There should be something here, like a place for everyone to write what they're hoping for. Not just home this time, but hope." Ms. Alvarez, overhearing, lit up. "Yes, the wall of hope." She handed Emily a marker. Emily stepped forward, her handwriting big and uneven, and wrote one word in purple: dream. The room grew quiet. One by one, parents picked up markers. A mother added peace. A boy scrawled friendship. An older man, his hand trembling, wrote the word respect. Soon the wall filled with colours and alphabets: English, Arabic, Spanish, Chinese, Haitian Creole, all stitched together on the paint like a quilt. For a moment, even the most sceptical parents stood in silence, looking at the wall. The father, who had once glared from the back of the classroom, leaned against the doorframe. Luca braced himself, expecting another challenge. Instead, the man picked up a marker, paused, and wrote slowly in block letters, "Respect." Then he set the marker down and walked out without a word. It wasn't applause, but it was something. Luca exhaled, the tension in his chest easing. This was what progress looked like, not perfect, not easy, but real. That evening, when the last parent left and the lights dimmed, Luca traced his fingers over Emily's purple word. She had fallen asleep on the couch, sketchbook on her lap, her hair falling across her forehead. He lifted her carefully and whispered, "You're the reason I can do this." As he carried her toward the door, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He expected a delivery update. Instead, it was a message from Maya Chen. "The story about you in the welcome room airs tomorrow night. Statewide coverage. Are you ready?" Luca froze in the quiet hallway, Emily's head resting on his shoulder. The welcome room had started with crayons and borrowed books, but tomorrow the world beyond their neighbourhood would see it, and see him. The night after the news segment aired, Luca's phone didn't stop buzzing. Parents from across the city wanted to visit the welcome room. A church in Brooklyn offered extra chairs. A retired librarian promised to send boxes of bilingual books. It should have felt like victory, but Luca's chest stayed tight. Attention was dangerous. Attention never came without cost. 2 weeks later, that cost came through the door. A Haitian family rushed into the welcome room, the father clutching a wrinkled eviction notice, the mother holding her daughter close. Their voices tangled in fear, rapid Creole spilling faster than Luca could follow. The girl's wide eyes darted from face to face, terrified. Luca sat them at a table and spread the papers out. His hands moved quickly, pointing to lines of legal English and explaining in broken Creole where he could. "They have 10 days, he translated softly, "but there are emergency funds. They don't have to leave tomorrow." The father's face fell anyway, confusion still clouding his eyes. The mother looked down at her daughter, whispering questions Luca couldn't catch. He searched for the right words, but his throat closed. How do you translate fear into comfort? Then Emily slid into the chair beside him. She looked at the little girl and spoke carefully in French, the bedtime phrases Luca had once taught her just for fun. "He says you have time, you don't have to be afraid." The girl blinked, then nodded, whispering back. Emily translated again, her small voice steady. "She says thank you." The mother broke into tears, covering both girls with her arms. The father pressed a hand to his face, shaking his head in disbelief. Ms. Alvarez, standing near the wall of hope, whispered, That child just gave them more than any translation ever could. The room was quiet for a beat, then someone began clapping. Others joined in, not for Luca this time, but for Emily, for a little girl who had carried her father's gift and made it her own. Luca swallowed hard, fighting the burn in his eyes. He wanted to tell Emily how proud he was, but all he could manage was a hand on her shoulder, steady and sure. By the end of the week, the community had rallied. Volunteers organised a fundraiser to help the Haitian family cover their rent. The story didn't need headlines. It spread on church steps, in corner stores, in whispered conversations at bus stops. The welcome room had become something bigger than a classroom. It was a lifeline. That night, as Luca tucked Emily into bed, she whispered sleepily, "See, Dad, the ship is big enough for everyone." He brushed her hair back, his chest aching in the best way. "You're the one helping me steer it," he said. But when he stepped back into the kitchen, his phone buzzed again. A message from Maya. "State officials saw the segment. They want to meet you. Call me first thing." Luca stared at the screen in the quiet apartment. Helping one family was one thing. Helping an entire city, that was something else entirely. The spring sun fell warm over the schoolyard on the first ever belonging day. Folding tables were crowded with homemade dishes, empanadas beside dumplings, lasagna beside jollof rice. Strings of paper flags stretched across the yard, each one marked with a word of hope from the welcome room wall. Children darted between the tables, their laughter echoing louder than the DJ's speaker. Luca stood near the stage, his tie a little crooked, palms damp. He wasn't comfortable being at the centre of things, but today wasn't about him. It was about families who had once felt invisible, now stepping into the light. Emily clutched his hand, her purple marker still staining her fingers. "You're nervous," she said. He smiled. "A little." "Don't be. You've got your crew now." The programme began with children greeting the crowd in their family languages. A boy sang a nursery rhyme in Polish. A girl from Yemen shouted hello in Arabic, her voice shaking until her classmates cheered her on. One after another, voices rose, each one turning fear into pride. Then Emily stepped onto the stage, her small notebook in hand. She leaned toward the microphone and read slowly, her French careful but clear. "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." The yard fell silent. Even the paper flags seemed to still in the breeze. When she finished, the applause was louder than the music. Luca pressed a hand to his chest, whispering a thank you to the woman Emily never knew, Megan, who had loved music the way Emily loved words. After the performances, a woman approached Luca. She looked familiar, though he couldn't place her until she spoke. "You once taught my linguistics class at Hunter," she said, handing him an envelope. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a letter, written in looping handwriting. "You once told us language is how we tell someone they matter. I built my career on those words. Seeing you here proves they were never just for a classroom, they were for the world." Luca folded the letter carefully, his throat tight. Around him, parents chatted in half English, half everything else. Kids ran between tables with plates too full for their hands. Laughter floated up, mixing with the smell of food and the sound of voices layered together like music. Ms. Alvarez raised her cup of coffee in a toast. "To belonging," she called. "To belonging," the crowd echoed. Later, when the yard had emptied and volunteers packed the last of the tables, Luca and Emily walked home hand in hand. She carried a crayon drawing rolled under her arm. At the apartment, she unrolled it proudly on the kitchen table. A rocket ship stretched across the page, bigger than ever, each window filled with smiling faces. At the very top, in purple letters, she had written, "We all belong." "We." Luca pulled her close, tears stinging his eyes. "That's the best map I've ever seen," he whispered. And as the city buzzed outside, their small apartment filled with something heavier than noise, lighter than air, belonging. Not the kind written on a form, but the kind you carry in your chest, the kind that says, "No one is left behind." Lesson. What we saw in Luca's journey is something simple, yet powerful. Belonging doesn't start with systems or titles. It starts when one person chooses to listen, when one parent chooses to step forward, when one child like Emily dares to share a single word of hope. We often think change requires grand gestures, but most of the time, it's just the quiet choice to see someone fully and to remind them they are not alone. Question. So here's something to reflect on. In your own life, who is waiting for you to listen, not with perfect answers, but with patience? Who around you might feel invisible until you remind them they matter? Because maybe the real question isn't how many languages we speak, but how many people feel heard because of us. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. May it linger with you long after the screen goes dark. Until next time, stay gentle, stay true, and I'll see you again here on Rain Inside.